Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dueger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. I'm so happy today to have our guest, Sara Barbosa, an intercultural midwife and apprentice under Muisca Indigenous Midwifery and Medicine Wisdom with Ramiro Romero and grandmother Naco in Colombia for the last 11 years. Sara also happens to be my sister-in-law, so I'm super excited to have her. She's studied anthropology in the Universidad of los Andes in Colombia and holds a master's degree in holistic psychology. Sara is a co-founder in the Mujeres Bachue Foundation and in the Elementa Salud Clinic, and is an advisor for the Traditional Health Council for the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia. Sara's work has focused on the understanding and translation of the knowledge of accompaniment within the matrix of wisdom and midwifery and Muisca medicine to bridge and complement other areas, especially preventive, sexual, and mental health and being, from the perspectives of good births, good living, and good dying. Thanks so much for being here today, Sara.
Hi, Steph. It's my pleasure.
So I want to dive right in because I'm so interested in your Indigenous Muisca midwifery training in Colombia, and wondering if you can just share a little bit about what you've been learning and apprenticing in for the past 11 years.
Yes, for sure. Apprentice began with my own birth, basically realizing that we were total illiterate on women's care. I had a beautiful birth at home with Ramiro. He was my midwife, and I wanted to have all the traditional care that my grandmother had too. And it was really beautiful having the quarantine, taking care of the work with the plants, the massages. And that definitely was an opening into, whoa, people have been safeguarding this knowledge of how to take care of women's physiology for thousands of years, connected to the plants of the territory. And how do we support this so more women can have the benefit of this? So that's how we began working with Ramiro. We began the foundation, and it was pretty quick to realize that he couldn't be the only person and his family, because there are a lot of women right now wanting to have also these types of care. So we started working together, training women too. I was part of doing the curriculum for the school with Ramiro and his family and translating this traditional wisdom. And on the day by day working together, it was also a realization that midwifery had been mutilated from colonial time. And as I learned about it, the realization was that midwives didn't take care only of this moment of birth, but also women throughout all their vital cycles. They were also the first pediatricians. They were the ones taking care of children. They were the ones accompanying women in their first wounds in their menstruation, women throughout their sexualities, women throughout their menopause too. We went through the understanding that these were women that were accompaniers of the community. And there was a bigger thing from just beyond birth. So it began with workshops with women around self-care, around strengthening the understanding of our own medicine, understanding and valuing our own studies, how we can accompany other women from perspectives that were nonviolent. So part of this translation that we did from traditional midwifery had a component on human rights and sexual and reproductive rights. And if how do we translate that and understood also better our legal framework in Colombia to attend. So apprenticing became a convergence of many different knowledges. It was also law through understanding midwifery from an illegal craft and work into a legal work. It's part of our political incidents work too. So it was a lot of learning with the plants and knowing how to accompany each other from nonviolent perspectives, really understanding how to go deeper with people to understand their needs. We call it reading the territory, like understanding each body as a unique universe and understanding their needs, their stories, and according to that, knowing which tools were the right one to accompany this specific body, story, spirit throughout all these different transits of giving birth, of being pregnant, and so on.
Could you share a little bit about some of the plants that you work with and how they might be helpful for women experiencing different things?
We have this analogy that our body is the body of the mother. And there's always different plants in the territories that would work for mothers. One of the first rules we have with plants that it's a different approach from herbalism is that we are not diagnosing or prescribing plants. We're very careful with that because it's not a wisdom that works from the symptom to the prescription. How we work with plants is from the oral tradition, from knowing the stories of the plant, knowing their advice and what the plant can share to match the advice with the question and the process the women is going, that it's very different. It's more like we're prescribing throughout stories and needs of the person, matching them with the plants. Ideally, we understand that this connection that we as women have with the territory, we would look at the plant already in that territory to accompany a woman. A key thing that we look at is and how we separate plants are with bitter and sweet plants. Normally, the bitter plant that we work with, for example, we have a sweet and a bitter chamomile, matricaria and chamomile. And bitter chamomile would work in the physical realm that the woman is going through, and the sweet one would aid in the spiritual processes that the women are going through. Normally, throughout pregnancy, we only use sweet plants because a lot of the bitters can have other effects that are not wanted during pregnancy. So it really took me through a whole different understanding of how we work with plants, not from a pharmacological molecular perspective, but from a more intimate aspect of the advice, the story of the plant, and how we match that with the journey the person is going through and their need in that moment.
Are you able to give an example of, say, a story of a plant and how that might match up with a woman about to give birth?
Yeah, one that it's used commonly. We keep going with chamomile. It's a chamomile is a grandmother that has this sweet advice that grabs you by the hand and walks with you throughout the process. So it's a great grandma to have during birth. It's really feeling accompanied, a comfort that connects you with your ancestors.
And then during a birth, would a woman have the plant lying there next to her, or would she drink chamomile tea, or how does that get incorporated?
Normally it is throughout teas, but we also use steam baths sometimes. Big steam baths, it's also a very commonly used one. Before the birth, the fig tree really helps mature the womb, the cervix, the mucus before. This is another plant we use commonly to help in the last months, in the last moment to support that.
I love what you're sharing. As my husband, Dan, and I are both wilderness therapists or have been trained as that. And this brings the plant world to a very different level, the much older level than we generally see in the West. And I love how the plants have their own stories and their own properties of healing beyond the pharmaceutical ideas that we might have in the West. Can you share a little bit about the Muisca midwifery accompanying the moments of birth, postpartum, becoming a mother? And how is it geared mostly towards women throughout their lives versus geared towards men?
The first thing about Muisca medicine is understanding the need and what the other person is going through from beyond what's politically correct, what we've been imposing. It's really going deep through a lot of verbal, oral space and intimacy, connecting with women. We have that we're accompanying women throughout their decisions, and we are giving them also enough information so they can decide how they want to give birth. We're not about, oh, this has to be a house birth, this has to be a water birth, but it's really understanding how this person wants to create this moment for herself. We understand birth also as another sexual important moment of women, so we want that same energy that hopefully happened, then this sensuality, this raw nature of an expression of the spirit of this person to always be a whole presence and a guiding authority in this whole thing. So it's really about connecting with what women want and how they want this same energy of the conception. We hope it's the same energy that we have during the birth, what allowed the women's body to open up, to connect with their bodies, to connect with their higher spirit. That is like this care of the physiology. It's the same needs we have for an amazing sexual encounter, for orgasm. Good smells, low light are the same conditions that we want during the birth. So it's about really connecting to women's sexuality, women's sensuality, their bodies, what is bringing them into their bodies that will allow us to do a good accompaniment. We see one of the expressions Ramiro, my teacher, says is we have to be the best lovers when we are accompanying women too. And we see this is a matrix that guides itself throughout the moons. So the first 3 months of our pregnancy is a new moon. While we are in the 6 to the 9 months, it's our full moon when we're having a whole different discovery and reconnection with this new body we're inhabiting. And when we're going in postpartum, it's the waning, the menguante, right?
The waning moon.
The waning moon is a moment where all the veils of illusion have fallen for us. And it's a moment where we're also going through a mourning within our own selves of the woman that was left behind. It's a moment where we're seeing the reality of the partners that we have chose. It's a moment where we are revising all our decisions of being mothers. So it's a very critical moment of how we accompany each other through this new reality of ourselves. One of the things we've definitely had around motherhood through the colony is these impositions around how do we have to mother. So it is also a critical moment and hopefully a part also of that whole journey of that woman connecting to her own uniqueness, authenticity, her own voice of how she wants also this. Because there's not just one way to mother someone else. And how does she want to mother in her own terms? So this is part of the postpartum, this transition into motherhood. What we try to do is strengthen as much the women's voice without any impositions, because there's many social impositions that are here inherited of how we should behave. one of the things we say is these children, these beings are choosing us for who we are, for our passions, our routines. So it's really important that those things aren't lost throughout motherhood because these kids are here for that. So really preserving the voice, these instincts coming in, this voice of the mother against everything that can be around her of what she needs, her kid wants, how she wants to do this is their work in this moment.
I love that strengthening of the woman's voice and her own intuitive sense of how she wants to mother her child. I think that often gets lost. There's a lot of noise and a lot of information out there. We live in a very information heavy age. And I think dropping into that sense of who am I and how do I want to mother? And maybe that looks similar to how I was mothered or grandmothered. And maybe it looks different. And I have my own piece to share around that.
Throughout the pregnancy, that's exactly one of the things that we start working is how the woman can differentiate what she has been given and imposed. So hopefully by the time when she starts mothering in the postpartum, this voice, this clarity of what is really her versus what she inherited can be filtered through. Yes.
And you shared that your grandmother had also gone through pregnancy and birth in this tradition?
Yes, my mother gave birth to three of her four kids at home. And this was popular in knowledge of this work with the plant, all these massages, this contention and care that we do with the uterus. It was part of the popular culture. And it was definitely one of the arguments I had with my family. Like, my grandmothers could do it, I can do it. They were
Exactly.
terrified about me giving birth at home. And that's one of the beautiful things we have here in Colombia. There's still not such a intergenerational distance about these ways we're taking care of women and their bodies throughout this moment. It's still a very latent memory that we have in our culture.
Mhm. What are some of the plant practices that are used postpartum?
Again, each woman's body is super different. One of the things that we're looking for is that the moment of birth is a moment where all our body is opening. We're not looking just like the dilation of the cervix, that it's, for example, something that the Western world can look at, but we're looking at the whole dilation of the body, of the spirit. Our crowns actually dilate in this moment of birth. And it's one of the things we can measure to see the process of the body of the women. So in the postpartum, what we want is the body of the women to close again. We normally have pregnancies that go around 40 weeks. So that's why we have a quarantine or a diet of at least 40 days to allow our bodies, our bones, our structures to go back, to honor the body, to go back where it was. One of the main ones is resting, having the body completely still. Normally, the women just rests in bed, nurses the kid, gets to understand this nursing process, and is nourished by the whole family. And then depending of what she's going through and the kid is going through, we have different plans and other techniques. One of the things, for example, I remember my quarantine. It was my first kid, and my family was very afraid. There was fear in how I was going to do this. There was fear around my home birth. So we worked with a plant called frailejón. So I had infusions of frailejón. Frailejón's advice is to be able to look that we have the capacity to have your fear in a cage so we can look at it and understand it from a safe perspective. And this is one of the plants that we also bathed Amaru in. It's also super antibiotic. We understand infections as fear. So all these plants that we have, that we work with fear, have antibiotic properties, for example. We also work with A very general one, because this is a process that we all share physiologically, is with rue. So I had 3 infusions of rue in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the night. And rue works, it's uterus contracting. So any clot that we have from the birth, it really helps it release. So rue is a great ally also for this moment. Then we also are prescribed different herbs to bath with. For example, we bathe with nogal. Nogal brings the memory of the structure of our bones. And the bones, understood from a traditional indigenous perspective, is the structure of our sun. So I bathed a lot in nogal to remember my own thought, my own structure, and could take care of. Some women, for example, if they have a hair during the birth, we also work with jarilla, that it's also a great antiseptic and antibiotic. So it depends on the experience of the mother and how we guard the uniqueness, the spirit of this person from all the different impositions that can come from the outside too.
Mhm. So you have two children, Amaru and Aliyah.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about how their births were different in terms of the plants and things like that?
Yeah, Amaru was my first kid, and we had the birds at home, and we had all this traditional care with it. It was chamomile, for example, that started my birth. Chamomile was the one that began my contractions, that accompanied me through the birth. I had a steam bath of chamomile, and I also had infusions with chamomile and honey. With Dalia, I barely had any plans, and both were very complicated births because they were turned around. They had their head down, but the head was tilted the other way. So they both were a little complicated. And with Aaliyah, we ended up going into the hospital, which gave me like a beautiful perspective of also how that could be accompanied in a nonviolent, proper way too. That is what we're doing in work in hospitals right now, not stigmatizing any of them. There's women that want to feel the safety of the uh, physician and stuff like this, so we can accompany that too. And with Aliyah was designing the curriculum of the school at the time, and we had a study group with 9 women, and I was basically the graduation of postpartum care of my group. So I receive all the care and the massages. We do massages with corn. We do work with cacao at the end of the quarantine too. Cacao reminds us our own blood and our own pleasures and the things that bring us well-being and pleasure. Cacao is for us the blood of the mother. Part of the ritual transition of the postpartum is working with cacao.
And now, in your 11 years of studying and apprenticing in, what's the future of what you're looking at?
We, during the pandemic, began a clinic that focuses in mental and sexual health with the Muisca reservation. We see that there's these key moments of our sexuality that in the somatic understanding of the Western world, our psyche is really connected and receives advice from these physical moments that mark our physiology. So in this clinic, we design this accompaniment from this physiological transit that we go as women, that we go as children, these moments when we're transiting from a liquid diet of nursing, just breast milk or milk, into solids, how we accompany those transits and how that is involved in our medical system, how first moons are accompanied, how we accompany the bodies of younger women, how is their relationship with their bodies, with their sexuality, with their sensuality. For us, the future has been learning from this physiological care that traditional medicine and midwifery has to design a system of health and accompaniment that has preventive perspectives from the accompaniment we have. We shouldn't go through these moments alone without information, without more people to support ourselves. So, this for us, being there for each other, having enough information, supporting the voices of people throughout their ages and how they want to inhabit and create their lives, for us is like a main aspect of well being and preventive medicine. So we're working with that right now. We see that is a great integration of medicines and slowly integrating with other different Western technologies, aspects that from a perspective of sovereignty, of strengthening people's voices over their lives, over their uniquenesses, can really support and accompany each other. I think bringing back the community aspect in health is really important. In the future, we feel that if we're doing a great job with our midwifery trainings, what we're doing is actually bringing back this knowledge of care into the community. So the best midwife in the future is going to be the community, taking care of each other. It's not going to be a knowledge that is isolated in one woman and one person.
And when you speak about integrating with some of the Western medical pieces, how have things been accepted and integrated into hospitals near you?
So one of our works and our branches has been in political incident with the work of many other midwives. We worked in the projects of law that is the 2244 here in Colombia that recognizes the rights of women in their pregnancy, their births, and their postpartums, and throughout breastfeeding and in neonatal death. This was a huge part to have a political framework that started shifting and obligating hospitals into more humanized protocols in how they accompanied women. That's one of the work we did here. And from that, we have been consulting for different hospitals, for different municipalities here around how to improve their practices, arrange their infrastructure so they can have better and higher quality attentions for women, understanding and updating their practices toward a humanized and respected birth.
I wish you so much luck in all of that. And I hope everything goes smoothly and well in the combination of Western, Indigenous pieces coming together for women and for their care. We've been speaking today with Sara Barbosa, an intercultural midwife and apprentice under Muisca Indigenous Midwifery and Medicine Wisdom, and also my sister-in-law. Thank you so much for being here, Sara. It's so nice to see you and so appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom.
Thank you, Steph, for this space, for all the work you're doing too. I feel
Take
very
care. Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast, or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.